In this film, we are going to discuss quite frankly the things that are normal and to be expected in the development of children in relation to sex.
Have sex, because you will get pregnant and die.
Is it true that if you don't use it, you lose it?
Is that a serious question?
If there's one thing that Hollywood has made hilariously but abundantly clear, in the United States, sex education is taboo. And having sex as a young adult, even more so.
Well, you see the detail that they go into in this picture here.
But recently, I had a conversation that reminded me, even after almost 8 years, I am still sometimes shocked by German culture. When one parent friend of mine casually said, "Oh yeah, our 17-year-old's girlfriend stayed over last weekend." My American brain immediately slammed on the brakes. Stayed over? As an overnight? In the same house? And you knew about this?
No, they're doing it! I know! You know! Yes, I know it!
You see, in most American families, that sentence would cause a full-on domestic emergency. Doors would be removed from the hinges, someone's dad would start cleaning a shotgun, a youth pastor would be called, and grandma would ask where society went wrong. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not every parent, not every family, not in every region, but compared with the US, many Germans are far less shocked by the idea that older teenagers might just have romantic and sexual lives.
Number 1, no dating till you graduate. Number 2, no dating till you graduate.
So today's culture shock video is not just about nude saunas, topless beaches, or Americans panicking when they see the Reeperbahn red light district in Hamburg. No. This video is about something deeper. How two places teach young people completely different emotional scripts about bodies, shame, privacy, trust, and sex. So, let's talk about it.
Some of you may become somewhat uncomfortable as parts of this film unfold, but I think if you listen carefully, you will agree that the concepts will contribute to the rearing of a mature person.
There exists an uncomfortable contradiction in American culture. On the one hand, the United States is absolutely saturated with sexual imagery. Sex sells hamburgers, cars, beer, and perfume. Sex sells gym memberships, music videos, movies, fashion, and dating apps. American teenagers are not growing up in a monastery. They are growing up inside one of the most powerful commercial media machines ever created. But when it comes to talking honestly about sex or learning about it in the first place, suddenly America becomes Victorian and incredibly inconsistent. You see, in the United States, your sex education depends entirely on your state, your school district, your school board, your parents, your church, your zip code, your teacher's comfort level, and the political climate of that particular year, which is insane when you think about it. A teenager in California and a teenager in Mississippi may both have the same biology, but one of them may not receive comprehensive, medically accurate sex education. And I'm not exaggerating. In the United States, 41 of those states and Washington, D.C. require sex education, HIV education, or both. But only 26 states require the instruction to be medically accurate. Yeah, you heard me right. Just half, which is crazy. We wouldn't accept a science class not being scientifically accurate. But equally concerning is the fact that 43 states and Washington, D.C. require that sex or HIV education programs to cover or stress abstinence. The idea that people should wait until they're married to have sex.
What if I want to have sex before I get married?
Well, I guess you just have to be prepared to die.
Now, I imagine that for my European audience watching this video, you're likely going to think that this is a relic of the past, but it's still very much around. Speaking from personal experience, this is precisely what I was taught in public school. In fact, there has actually been a recent boost in federal funding for abstinence-only programs totaling over $100 million annually, a sum that some states then partially match. And listen, abstinence is a healthy choice that many teens will make, but there's a huge difference between it being a personal choice versus one that is guilt-tripped onto you or reinforced in lieu of safe sex practices. Realistically, it should not be the only thing you teach, and not just because many studies question its efficacy, to which there are many. The fact is, according to the CDC, most Americans have more than one sexual partner in their lifetime, and the average age at which people start to begin having sex is around 17. So just saying don't do it is neither practical nor reasonable. But this issue goes far beyond simple legal ambiguity. While some state guidelines are vague and don't make it clear what kids should learn, they do make it clear what they shouldn't learn. For instance, in Mississippi, while you can talk about contraceptives, state law explicitly states that public school programs shall not include any demonstration of how condoms or other contraceptives are applied. In the past, this has actually led to disciplinary action for teachers when unauthorized physical demonstrations or props occurred on school grounds. And yeah, that's terrible. Partially because it's kind of funny to put a condom on produce, but mainly because Mississippi ranks #1 in the country in teen pregnancy rates. And this just highlights how bizarre and, quite frankly, contradictory U.S. standards are when it comes to sexual education. On the one side, social media has made it incredibly easy for young adults to access endless sexual content. On the other side, adults are just arguing over whether or not they should be taught accurate information about contraception, consent, and sexual health. This is just my opinion, but far more often than not, the United States does not actually protect young people from sexual culture. It just protects adults from having to talk honestly about it.
All I'm saying is keep the government out of the bedroom business. Teaching my boy the facts of life is my job. Oh my God.
Jeremy's starting point is not that children and teenagers are tiny adults, but it's also not that they're the picture of innocence and purity until the age of 18. The German assumption is more developmental. Children grow, bodies change, adolescents become curious, relationships begin, and sexual identity develops. And us, as the adults, have a responsibility to prepare young people for this reality. In fact, the German government published its first ever school book on sex education way back in 1969. And today, sex education begins in primary school, usually 3rd or 4th grade, and continues throughout all types of school up to middle school. The curriculum covers topics such as the basic anatomy for men and women, as well as puberty, taught together. As students age, the material advances to contraception, consent, identity, responsibility, and healthy relationships. Which is also something, by the way, that differs significantly from my own upbringing in the United States. Boys and girls were never taught together. We were always separated for these discussions. So girls never really learned about the male anatomy or how they mature, and boys never learned about girls' reproduction. Which, yeah, you can imagine how that one turns out.
Why don't you draw the whole lady? So we know where everything goes. Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, the whole lady.
All right.
Suddenly it became very clear why Mr. Cutlip had never been married.
Now, it is worth mentioning here that Germany's federal states have autonomy over education, so you will find some regional differences, albeit them slight, from one state to another. The general principles, though, still remain the same. And since 2002, sex education is mandatory nationwide. While parents are informed before sex ed classes start in school, they are not allowed to take their children out of those classes, like they can in the United States. Yeah, you heard me right. Well, studies show that the actual opt-out rates for sex ed are typically quite low, somewhere from 1% to 5% nationwide. These numbers are highly localized. In highly conservative districts, withdrawal rates have been noted at 13% and 20%. Legally speaking, 43 states plus Washington, D.C. allow for parents to opt their children out of sex and HIV education.
I will now show a short sex education film. Ezekiel and Ishmael, in accordance with your parents' wishes, you may step out into the hall and pray for our souls.
But here in Germany, sex education is not taboo, but rather a public health priority. In fact, Germany's Federal Center for Health Education has tracked youth sexuality for decades. Its youth sexuality study has been running as a representative repeat survey since 1980, and the 10th iteration is surveying more than 5,700 adolescents, parents, and young adults between 2004 and 2027. And that alone tells you something a lot about the cultural differences here. Germany studies youth sexuality as a public health and education topic. Plus, in Germany, sexuality education is not only about preventing pregnancy or sexually transmitted infections, it's also about puberty, relationships, bodies, consent, contraception, identity, emotional development, and responsibility. And I think that is the part that most American schools often miss. German sex education is not necessarily saying, go, have sex. It's saying, you are a developing person. You need information before you need shame. And that's a very different philosophy. And while we're on the subject of privacy, trust, and autonomy, I want to talk to you about a small change that I made that has transformed my safety and security. And rather than tell you, I'd like to show you. Try Googling yourself real quick, full name, city, and state. You'll be shocked at how many sites publicly share your private information. Creepy, right? Well, whether you're privacy conscious or just don't like the idea that anyone anywhere can find where you live or where you work, it just makes sense to take advantage of the service that keeps this information private, which is why I use the tools from the sponsor of today's video, Incogni. Incogni tracks down and removes your personal data from multiple sites, including online directories, people search sites, and even commercial databases. And I don't have to do anything. They do all of the legwork. Just sign up and give them permission to act on your behalf. And then they go out and find the list that you were on and demand that you be taken off. Plus, if you sign up for their unlimited plan, you have access to their custom removal feature to take down almost anything that is exposed about you online. Simply point them in the direction of where your data is being exposed, and their privacy experts will handle the rest. So while it may seem that taking back your personal data is challenging, their custom removals feature makes it effortless for you. Again, just give Incogni the link to a website that's sharing your information and watch it disappear in real time. And you know, they can't harm you if they can't find you. So use the code Ashton at the link below and get 60% off an annual plan at incogni.com/Ashton. But I would for a minute like to return to the example that shocks Americans the most. A 16 or 17-year-old staying overnight at their boyfriend or girlfriend's house. In the US, this is often treated like a parental red line and a frequent storyline of Hollywood films. Even relatively liberal American parents are probably likely going to say, you can date, but no sleepovers. And yeah, the fear is obvious. If teenagers are allowed to share a private space, they're probably going to have sex. Therefore, we just simply remove the private space altogether. But in my experience, German parents are often more varied, but many take a more pragmatic approach. They often think they're in a serious relationship. They are old enough to need trust. I would rather they are safe, informed, and able to talk to us than sneaking around.
It's a perfectly normal thing for two human beings
Dad,
to
what
do.
are you doing?
This is human nature at its best. Son, everybody does it. Your mother and I, well, not so much anymore, but we...
Oh my God, they're watching!
And again, don't misinterpret me here. This does not mean that German parents are casually encouraging sex. The difference is that many parents here are less invested in just pretending teenagers have no sexual or romantic agency. And legally, Germany also recognizes adolescent sexual development earlier than many Americans expect. Germany's Independent Commissioner for Child Sexual Abuse Issues explains that for adolescents older than 14, the law assumes they can and should develop sexually and try things out, while still protecting them from coercion, exploitive relationships, abuse of dependency, and lack of voluntary self-determination. And that legal framework probably sounds shocking to most Americans because the US tends to put a very bright cultural red line around 18. Before 18, you're a child. After it, an adult. But Germany often treats adolescence as a transition. Not adulthood, not childhood, a transition. And that transition comes with increasing responsibility, increasing privacy, increasing trust, and most importantly, increasing autonomy. But this is exactly where the American panic runs into a problem. If Germany is more open about youth sexuality, does this mean worse outcomes? Well, not necessarily. For starters, Germany has far lower adolescent birth rates than the United States. World Bank linked data published through FRED shows Germany's adolescent fertility rate at about 5.2 births per 1,000 women aged 15 to 19 in 2024. Granted, the United States has improved dramatically over the past few decades, but teen births remain higher than Germany's. Recent CDC-linked reporting shows U.S. teen birth rate falling to 11.7 births per 1,000 females ages 15 to 19 in 2025. Again, a historic low, but still more than double Germany's recent rate. So the simplistic American fear of, if you openly talk about sex, teenagers will also get pregnant, doesn't really hold up all that well. Germany is far more open and has lower teen birth rates. Now, to be fair, this is not just because of sex education. Teen pregnancy rates are affected by things like poverty, healthcare access, contraception access, family structure, religion, inequality, abortion access, media, and regional culture, among many others. But that is exactly the point. Sexual outcomes are not improved by silence alone. But unwanted pregnancy is just one potential outcome from a lack of comprehensive sexual education for young adults. Because, quite frankly, sex education is not just about condoms, pregnancy, puberty, and disease. It is also about identity and self-exploration. Understanding important questions like, who am I attracted to? And what does a healthy relationship look like? And this is where the American system becomes extremely political. According to Guttmacher, 21 US states and Washington, D.C. have policies on whether or how sexual orientation and gender identity may be discussed in sex education classes. But those policies point in completely different directions. 8 states and D.C. require inclusive instruction on a range of sexualities and gender identities. 7 states require instruction that portrays non-heterosexualities or non-cisgender identities as shameful, unacceptable, or illegal. And 10 states prohibit the discussion of sexual orientation or gender identity entirely, or are restricted to certain age groups, the so-called don't say gay approach.
There is no reason for instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity to be part of K-12 public education. Full stop.
Now, Germany is not free of controversy. Germans also argue about this. Parents complain, politicians fight, and some people worry that schools are sexualizing children. And that exact fear showed up in Germany too, especially during debates over sexual diversity in school curriculum. But the baseline is different. And that's one of the culture shocks that I wager surprises Americans the most when they really get a feel for German culture. There just doesn't seem to be the same level of culture war panic that exists in the United States over this topic. Germany's sex education is generally framed as comprehensive, mandatory, and part of school-based education. And the understanding of the tapestry of sexuality and sexual expression, not just the basic mechanics and biology, is an important piece of that puzzle. But this brings me to the final and perhaps deepest cultural difference between Germany and the United States. I think that Germany is often just more comfortable with the practical side of sexuality.
Birth control pills.
Again, in the United States, these topics are often emotionally loaded. A teenager asking for contraception can be interpreted as a sign that something has just gone wrong. I know I certainly felt that way and just riddled with anxiety the first time I had to go ask my parents if I could get birth control, and actual shame when I asked my doctor about it. But in the time that I've spent in Germany, it is abundantly clear to me that such a request is more likely to be interpreted as a sign that someone is trying to do the responsible thing. And I cannot understate this enough. That is a massive difference. In one culture, contraception can be framed as permission, but in another culture, contraception is framed as protection. And I think the fear for many American parents truly is that if we make contraception available, are we encouraging sex? And you can see this directly written into law, especially because how much autonomy you have over your own reproductive health depends entirely on where you live. Currently, only 24 states and the District of Columbia allow minors to legally consent to their own contraceptive care without involving a parent. But in the other 26 states, things get a lot more complicated. Even today, in 2026, most states still consider children legally the property of their parents and have passed extensive parental rights laws that require parental consent for any and all sexual reproductive health measures. Many, mercifully, have exceptions, but in places like South Dakota, they only allow for contraception without parental consent if the minor is married, which, that's a whole other can of worms. But meanwhile, here in Germany, anyone over the age of 14 can get birth control, like the pill, without parental consent. That's right, legally, you don't need your parents' permission. And by the age of 16, doctors generally assume that you are mature enough to consent. By law, doctors are bound by strict medical confidentiality and are not permitted to inform your parents without your explicit permission. And yeah, there's all there that you can link to childhood human rights laws, medical autonomy laws, but I also just see this as a general pragmatic German view. Not romantic, not sentimental, not always warm and fuzzy, but practical. Here, the general attitude is far more likely. If sex happens without contraception, what exactly have we achieved here? So, learning about this laissez-faire attitude that many German parents have about sex education, contraception, and young adult sleepovers, at first, again, was really shocking for me. But the more I unpacked it and really thought about it, I don't know, I guess I just didn't realize the scale of the rock that I had been living under. So what's the biggest culture shock between Germany and the United States? Well, it's not that German teenagers are all having sex and American teenagers are all innocent. That's ridiculous. Teenagers are teenagers. The real difference is how adults respond to that reality. And this experience really made me notice how much denial is contained in the American approach. Again, teenagers are often sexualized by the media, but adults pretend that education is the danger. It is healthy for teenagers to form romantic relationships, but the adults pretend privacy creates desire. Teenagers have access to the internet, but adults fight over whether schools should be the ones explaining contraception. Teenagers need guidance, but I think it is we, the adults, who turn guidance into politics. And let's be honest, culture shocks are rarely only about the foreign country. It is also about seeing your own country from the outside. And yeah, at the end of the day, Germany is not necessarily more obsessed with sex or promiscuity for young adults. It is still incredibly private. It is still rule-bound, it's still socially reserved, it's still full of awkward parents and embarrassed teenagers. Germany may simply be less obsessed with pretending that sex just doesn't exist at all. And for Americans, and certainly for this American, that might be the biggest culture shock of all. But I think this would be a really fascinating topic to explore down in the comment section of this video as well, of how sex education was approached where you live. Because again, there's a lot of differences from one country to another, not just in what's taught in schools, but I also think just culturally, what is socially acceptable. So I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And for more content from Type Ashton, hit that subscribe button. So I'll see you in the next video. Tschüss!